Hey there, dear viewers. Welcome to Obsessed with Werewolves. I'm so glad you're here because I know you, like me, have a passion for all things werewolf. From their captivating tales to their mysterious nature, we're going to explore it all. So let's dive right in and satisfy our obsession together. Chapter 23. Her vision undled. Only the wolf running at her side kept her going, kept her pointed in the right direction. There was a shout way behind her, back where she'd been forced to leave Ben. Oh God, Ben. All the things that could happen, all that would happen. As if sensing her thoughts, the wolf growled and used his muzzle to push her faster. Harley's feet hit the ground hard as she sprinted through the trees. The road. She could see it through the tree line, and a bit further down, Ben's old Pontiac. She hit the road, the wolf close at her back, protecting. She clawed at the door and barely gave the wolf a chance to jump in before getting in herself. The fear was a real, solid brick in her chest. Her hands shook so bad it took her to tries before she could get her phone from her pocket. They're right behind me. They're right behind me. She hit redial. Will picked up on the second ring. You just can't get enough of. He cut himself off when her sub echoed across the line. Harley. They're right behind me. Oh God. Will. They took Ben. They have Ben. I'm next. The wolf wind. He was on all fours, his front paws on one side of her legs, his back on her other, staring out the window. She had to pull back to have enough room to call Will. Where are you? Will jumped immediately into battle mode. He shouted something off the line. Mace on street. In Ben's car. He'll yell the street name at someone. Harley, focus. Let's focus on you. Do you have the keys? No, Ben had them. He'd stuck them into his pocket when they'd walked over. Why hadn't she grabbed them? Yet another reason she was going to die here. No. The word came out watery, wavy. The wolf wind again. Okay. You're going to have to hotwire the car. Well, I've never. It's all right. Just follow my lead, okay? Put the phone on speaker. With shaky fingers, she complied. Ben set the phone on her thigh. It's on. Find something pointy. Something sharp and strong. She dug through the middle console like a mad woman. Receipts. Spare change. Duct tape. A manual. Nothing. There's nothing but coins. Oh God. Check the glove box. The wolf did not want to move over, but she pushed, ignoring his warning growl, and opened the glove box. Napkins. Bundles of napkins. And, yes, I've got a Swiss Army knife. Good. There's a plastic cover on the steering column, right under the wheel. See it? Under the wolf. There was no way. You need to move, she told the rogue. The wolf bared his teeth. Look, I don't know why you're here, but you have to work with me, or we both die. Harley. The wolf moved to the passenger seat and kept upright, still watching the line of trees. Which reminded her of the time. They were running out of it. I'm here. She had to unscrew the screws, but finally the thing popped open. Will. We're running out of time. No, we're not. Not if you keep a steady pace. Stay with me. Now see the bundle of wires. Yes, there were so many. Focus on the red wires. Those connect to the power, Will said. There are two sets. One red, one off red. Don't panic. You need to cut both. Strip the wires, and connect like colors. Harley, you can't touch those wires with your bare hands. She throbbed at the frustration, tears burning her cheeks. What am I supposed to use? Then she remembered the glove box items. There's duct tape in the glove box. Perfect. Wrap your fingers. It took her too long to get the wires together. She'd barely started connecting the seconds set together when the bullets pelleted into the car. She screamed, ducking low and praying for it to start. Come on, come on. One of the windows in the back fractured, the glass chiming as it hit the carpet seat. Harley whimpered, clicking, clicking, clicking the wires together. Harley, what's happening? Will shouted through the phone. She couldn't hear him as well through the clinking of bullets hitting metal. I can't, the engine earned over. Her heart in her throat and head low, she flicked the car into drive and punched it. The car shot off. A mile away from the pack house, she slowed to a stop. Her hands shook too bad to continue driving, and she knew if she didn't stop soon, she'd likely crash the vehicle. Even the simple task of pulling over to the side of the road had become an incredibly hard job, the wheel under her hands coated in sweat. After the car stopped, Harley could hear her own heartbeat, like a pounding drum, in her ears. The wolf's cold nose hit her jaw. He winced, her eyelids weighed down, and she shivered, cold. Despite the summer heat, it was freezing in this beat-up wreck of a car. The wolf leaned into her, his high keening shaking his body. She rested on him and used him for support. He was warm, his fur soft, and it was a comfort against her chilled skin. Think they'll find us. She was so tired, and worried about Ben. She'd left him there on the ground, at the mercy of whoever attacked them. Ben, kind, forgiving Ben. How could things have gone so wrong? Her brain flashed her images, Ben still on the ground, the sleek silver dart buried into the tree bark, the wolf with his hackles raised. She smoothed a hand down the wolf's belt. It was rough, but almost silky in patches. How had he found them, and why wasn't she freaking out? Being trapped in a car, a tiny enclosed space, with a rogue wolf was one of the biggest no-nos of wolf culture. He felt safe. Strangely, his actions to protect her made her comfortable around him. A rogue wouldn't have gone to all that trouble only to rip her to pieces. Why her, though? The wolf whined again. I know. It's not safe. Harley tried to keep her eyes open, but the after effects of all that adrenaline left her dead tired. I just need 2 minutes. The wolf growled low. Relax. It's all good. She hoped. The churn of an engine approaching had her shooting up so fast her head spun. A car shot down the road. The driver slammed on the brakes at the last second. Doors opened. And then she was wide awake. No. She hit the locks again to be sure and yanked the wires hanging from under the wheel. With jerky strokes she started clicking the off, red wires together. Shit. Someone shouted her name. The enemy knew her name. A whimper crawled from her throat. They wouldn't get out of this one. She couldn't be fast enough this time. Couldn't get her hands and arms to work right. Harley. A pound at the window. Harley. She flinched so hard she dropped the wires. But the person at the window still banged. Harley, it's me. Harley. The wolf pushed at her shoulder with his muzzle, nudging her to look. A familiar face peered at her, concerned. She knew him. How did she know him? As if hearing her thoughts, he said, Harley. It's Will. She didn't remember hitting the unlock button, but somehow he was there surrounding her. He picked her up, her shoulder pressed into the warmth of his chest. She leaned her head on where his neck met his shoulder. Will, I'm here. You're okay. He kept chanting, as if he needed the reassurance as much as her. Someone get me a blanket. He shouted. Her mind decided to take a vacation then. It shot her bits and pieces of the scene, the movement around her too much to absorb completely. I think she's in shock, Something fuzzy and soft cocooned her. Where's Ben? A wolf growling. Snapping. Holy shit. That's that rogue wolf. Back away slowly. It's not hurting anyone. Why isn't it going after us? The body pressed to hers vibrated with sound. Wait. Stop. Let it be. It seems too. Like her. Then she tried to tell them. Ben above her head. Will said, I know which I know. Harley Ray looking. I promise you. We're the witch, we're looking. Why don't you relax? Take a nap for a bit. We'll keep. Before he could finish the sentence, Harley's body decided she would do just that. She drifted off. Chapter 24. Harley woke up in her own bed. The white comforter had been pulled up tight to her neck, creating a bubble of warmth. Across it, another light blue blanket covered her feet to keep them warm. You're awake. Bailey sat next to the bed, reading one of Harley's worn romance novels. She put a hand to her forehead and pushed the blankets down to her waist. The heat gathered under the blankets was nice, but causing her to sweat. What happened? Bailey snorted. They want me to ask you that. It was night outside. Wind rushed against the side of the house, strong enough to rustle the trees. Inside, the lamp on the white nightstand next to her bed cast a dim, cozy light throughout the room. Have I been asleep all day? Pretty much. Will didn't want any of us to wake you. Will. Where is he? Bailey gave her a sad look. Out with some of the guys from the patrol team. They're still searching. The worry closed her throat enough that it took her a moment to respond. How long? Her friend glanced down at her watch. Maybe 4 hours. He's not coming back. Is he? They wouldn't know what happened to Ben. No one would have a clue whether he was alive or dead, or if he'd already been killed. And she had to live with that. Bailey must have seen the absolute desolation on her face because she gripped Harley's hand tight between hers. Alpha Mark can feel him through the bond. It's extremely faint because of distance, but he's there. Harley blinked up at the ceiling. Don't do it. Don't cry. I should have grabbed him. I could have dragged him to the rodent. Dragged him. It hurt, the words felt heavy as she upchucked them, but slowly she spilled the details of what had happened earlier in her parents' meadow. Bailey followed along, quiet as the story unfolded. When it was over, Bailey was furious. She poked a finger in Harley's direction. You are not to blame for this. Do you hear me? There's no way you. A latent, could have carried Ben to the car and gotten both of you out safely. A latent. If she'd been a shifted wolf, the beast would have been able to lend her enough strength to save Ben. Instead, her pathetic lack of a wolf had left her helpless. Her latency could have signed Ben's death warrant. I can see what you're thinking, Harley. And you can't put that on yourself. You can't put that on your conscience. It'll tear you apart. She pulled her hand from Bailey's warm grip and covered her face. I don't understand how this happened. We were fine, everything was starting to get better. The important thing is that the pack will not let this drop. We are all going to search for Ben, and we are going to tear apart the people who've dared to mess with our family. Hearing Bailey reference each member of the pack as a family set it in stone. The Willow Creek pack was a family. They supported each other, gave each other the love and comfort and familial solidarity as needed. We will find Darlin, and heaven help anyone who gets in our way. Bailey was nice enough to sit with Harley for a while, at least long enough for her to fall back asleep. When she woke up the second time, it was because someone sat on the bed next to her and smoothed a hand over her hair. She opened her eyes. Sunlight streamed in through the window. The natural light, combined with the white theme of her room, made everything seem brighter, newer. The books stacked on her nightstand and along the top of her dresser looked taller, some of the volumes more stressed. but it was the blankness of everything else that shouted at her. The frame on the wall depicted a generic landscape, the photography copyright symbol right on the corner that hadn't been switched out yet. The throw pillows along her window seat hadn't been touched and the walls were horribly, pathetically blank. She wondered what Ben's room looked like. And the thought of the posters along his wall, the frames that most likely overtook his dresser, or an old alarm clock with the word snooze half wiped off, made her lungs shrink. "Hey," was said softly. He gave her a half smile. "How do you feel?" "Still tired. Still to blame." "Fine." He shot her a look that said, "Nice try, but I see the war in your eyes." Yet he let it go and took her hand in his. She squeezed his, liking the feel of his warm, coarse grip surrounding hers. They took him, Harley said. She waited for him to deny it, waited for him to correct her. Instead, his lips formed into a line. "A confirmation. You're not going to let them go, right?" She sat up and leaned forward, making sure he heard every word. "We can't just let him be," her voice broke, cutting off the end of her sentence. "Taken." The unspoken word dangled between them. "Trackers are ready to go out in an hour or so. They'll find him. Then we bring him home." He made it sound simple, as if Ben had been a set of keys she'd lost or a misplaced book, and getting him back would be as easy as picking him back up and returning him to his shelf. But they'd have no idea who took Ben, or what they'd find when they tracked him. Another thought occurred to her then, and it made her stomach sour. "You're going with, aren't you?" He wouldn't meet her eyes. A beat passed. Then, "Not right away. I'll be taking up the rear. I wanted to make sure you'd be okay and settled before I left." Harley's fingers locked around his arm. "You have to get him back. Will, you have." Will cupped her face between hot palms. "I will. Harley," he said. "And when I get back, we will have some things to discuss." I don't think it was a coincidence that the same meadow was attacked. Things like don't just happen. She couldn't think about it. The implications of it all. The idea that maybe her family had been maliciously seeked out. Who will be guarding your back? People I trust. People I know who would give up their lives for me as I would for them. He didn't say it, but Harley heard Pack loud and clear, because that's what Pack was. People willing to give their lives for other members. Family. Pack was family. "I'm leaving Cam here," Will said. "I need you to look after him. Keep him safe. Anything." She'd have done anything he'd ask her to. She couldn't go with them to retrieve Ben, but by God, she'd do anything and everything else they needed her to. "I will." "Good." "Now we have just one more issue," a loud howl sounded from outside, as if it were below her window. She looked at Will in alarm, but he only laughed at her expression. "Want to tell me why that rogue wolf won't stop guarding your window?" They stepped through the sliding glass to the expansive green backyard. The turquoise pool glittered in the already hot morning sun, and if it were another time, if she didn't have the life she did, she wondered if her summers would be spent by the poolside soaking up rays. She would have liked to have summer be a time of relaxation, of carefree hangouts and unending hot dogs on the grill. Though the sun was strong this morning, the wind blowing from the east did a wonderful job combating the humidity saturating the air. The emerald leaves on the trees swished against each other as the wind pushed them west. On the patio, black iron chairs rested around a glass table, some still pulled half out, as if someone had just vacated them and planned on coming back. Further down, below where her window rested, that rogue wolf stared at them. His yellow-green eyes met hers and he cocked his head like he didn't quite understand why she was here. She didn't understand why he was here. Why didn't he let her get taken too? Why was he near the meadow in the first place? How did he sneak past the patrols? Will must have heard her thoughts because in a low tone he said, He snuck past the patrols, something that doesn't happen often. With such a large territory, we've had to cut some corners here and there over the years. Some areas are less patrolled than others. The meadow. He nodded, his eyes never leaving the seemingly calm wolf who'd sat down in the gentle grass. Ever since the attack, we've had to put our resources to really good use and focus on protecting the center of the territory as best as possible. We didn't want a reenactment of what happened 13 years ago. So we decided to cut the meadow from most, if not all, patrols, then knew not to go there. He knew Alpha Mark doesn't want anyone hanging around the area where they can't be protected. But this guy, Will jerked his chin at the wolf, should have been picked up by the patrols. The 3 times he's jumped us, hardly took in the wolf. He was content there to lay, his fur swaying gently in the breeze. He just waited, observed. Why is he still here? She didn't know pack rules as well as others, but shouldn't the pack have kicked him out or something? Will shifted on his feet, his arm tracing hers. You're one of our own. Harley. A pack keeps their members safe. What happened at the meadow? We couldn't keep you safe. His lips pressed into a line, and it took him a moment before he continued. This guy did what we were supposed to. We won't forget that. For some reason, Harley thought she heard an unspoken "I won't forget that." But it was overshadowed by something else Will had said. You're one of our own. You're one of our own. She bit down the ball of emotions crawling up her throat until it ached. In front of her, the wolf wind. He stays as long as he doesn't cause any trouble, Will said. And if he does? She asked, but she knew the answer. Wolves don't get kicked out for invading territory, they get killed. Will tugged at her hand and threaded his fingers through hers. The warmth surrounding her hand made her feel attached. Like maybe, somehow, she wasn't floating along the surface of the world. Adrift, but instead had found a connection to ground her. Ahead of her, she swore the wolf smiled. Chapter 25. There were too many questions about the wolf and not nearly enough answers. As they approached, Will pulled her slightly behind him, ready to face the wolf first. He curled his hand around hers, fingers intertwining, and didn't let go. Harley loved it. I don't get it, she whispered behind him. Wouldn't his first instinct be to protect the Omega? It should have been. I'm not even a wolf. Does your wolf sense me as a wolf? Will shook his head, his focus never leaving the rogue. My wolf knows you're different. But he likes you. Her heart skipped a beat. Really? The thought of Will's wolf liking her gave her butterflies. Especially since wolves sometimes didn't agree with their human counterpart. Having the animal like or even love someone else was a wonderful sign. She put her other hand on Will's arm, resisting the urge to admire the muscle there. Focus. Harley. This is the 3rd time I've seen him. Every time he's been spotted on pack rounds. You were there. He snuck through that many times. If a rogue got through their patrols that easily, how safe were they really? It doesn't make sense, and I've talked to the patrols. There should have been a trace, a scent left behind. They've gotten nothing. Is that possible? To leave no scent. Scent was everything to werewolves. Unless this rogue washed himself in the stream over and over, there was no way he'd. Will's hand tightened painfully, his entire frame tensing up. Harley. A wolf's scent can become normal if they move about the same territory often enough. You're telling me this wolf has been on the property the whole time? Hiding. Would he get caught sometime? Will's voice sounded hollow as he said, not necessarily. Not if he knew the territory well enough. Not if he's had years to get to know it by heart. Will, I don't understand. If his scent has been here for years, if he was once a part of the pack, then the patrols would write him off. And then she knew. For the way he treated her, deep down in her gut, in her soul she just knew. She crumbled to her knees. Matthias. The wolf whined and padded over. He nudged at her chin with his muzzle and accepted her fingers as they threaded through his fur. Within seconds her heart burst, sobs racking her frame. Over and over she said his name. Like if she'd only say it enough, it'd help her realize this wasn't a dream. Her brother was alive. He'd somehow, someway survived the attack. The explosion, how? Her voice wasn't much more than a croak. The attack, I thought, how? Matthias looked up at her, his amber green eyes big. He tried to convey something to her. But her brain had started an endless loop. Matthias was here. Matthias, her brother, had survived the attack, somehow. And he'd been here the whole time on Pack territory. Her heart clenched painfully as another thought took over. You've been here all along. And I left you. After the attack, she'd gone to live with her Aunt Tracy and Uncle Eric for years. For years, Matthias had been right under their nose, closer than she thought. You have to hate me. For abandoning you like that, Matthias only winned. He put a massive paw on her knee and settled down until his head rested in her lap. Over her shoulder, Will had dropped into a crouch and ran a soothing hand over her upper back. This is good, though, she continued, the hope quickly climbing up from her stomach. We can find then, and then maybe get a little place in the territory. And rebuild their home. Matthias, can you change? I want to hear your voice. She wanted him to hold her, wanted to see his hair, his bright smile, and the way he'd matured. Would he have long hair? Dad's strong jaw. Did he get rid of the baby fat? Usually wolves started to go through puberty after their first change. Matthias had only just changed when they'd been attacked, so she'd never gotten to see the way he'd grown. Would he be tall like Will and tower over her? Matthias didn't respond. Matthias. Maybe he just needs a minute, Will said, though he sounded like he wasn't too sure. Out of nowhere, Matthias' ears flicked back and he jolted upward, growling over her shoulder. Harley glanced back. Alpha Mark had come out of the house and made his way over. Matthias, chill. It's Alpha Mark. Remember Alpha Mark. Will stood as the Alpha came over, dropping his head slightly in respect, sir. Alpha Mark ignored Matthias, growling. Did I hear you call him Matthias? Yes, sir. He frowned, as in Matthias fierce. Harley nodded, her hand still threaded through Matthias' fur. Matthias, relax. I don't think he likes anyone but you. Harley, Will said. That's not true. He doesn't mind having you around either. She'd pointed out, and it was true. Matthias had let his guard down around Will when he rested on Harley's lap. He didn't feel a need to protect her when Will was close. She tried not to think too deeply about what that meant. He wasn't too fond of Cam, if I can recall. Maybe. But she kept looking at Matthias and the way his hackles had raised. His amber, green eyes had gone like there was no recognition there. Matthias. She barked his name, but when his gaze flicked to hers, her whole body jerked. As she analyzed him, his muzzle pulled back in a snarl. Will, oh, which? Will. Will had noticed the same thing. He's feral, no. Harley's eyes filled and she let the tears fall. If only so she could see. No. He was just here. He was just with us. Just a few moments ago. The wolf in front of her responded as she talked. Listened as she asked questions. No, nothing. Standing before her was a creature who sensed the dominance in Alpha Mark and acted as a wolf would. He'd gone on the defensive. If this were Matthias, truly Matthias, he'd know this was Alpha Mark. Harley, he'd been alone for a long time. Will's voice was sad. I doubt he's even changed back. The attack might have influenced him. Alpha Mark spoke. If he'd been hurt or scared, he probably wandered off and found a corner to hide in. By the time he'd feel comfortable enough to move, he'd be worried about being attacked at any moment. It's happened before. Traumatic events sometimes damage the wolf bad enough that he can't shift back. Harley finished in a whisper. Alpha Mark nodded reluctantly. He might never shift back. As it is, it looks like his memory is coming in bursts. In a few years, his human side might disappear completely. Harley watched as a certain focus came back into Matthias' eyes. He shook his head, glanced around, and laid down slowly. She knew right now that he was here with them, that he recognized them. But how long would that last? How long until he went back to pure wolf, relying solely on animal instincts? And how long would it be before he wouldn't recognize her at all? There's something we can do, right? She asked. Contact might help, Will said, again rubbing at her upper back. If we can get the animal side to bond with the pack-in with you, then at least the animal will be friendly. If Matthias doesn't return, Alpha Mark crossed his arms, his expression grave. As it is, I don't like the idea of a rogue hanging out on my territory. Fire shot up her bloodstream. She wanted to yell at him that this wasn't a rogue. It was her brother, Matthias. The brother she'd thought was dead along with the rest of her family and just as much a part of the pack as anyone else. He belonged in this pack more than her, a shiftless girl. She opened her mouth to ask how he could possibly tell her to abandon him, but he continued. But if he's not a threat to me or mine, then I'll have to learn to deal. That being said, if he doesn't continue to act civil, I'll take matters into my own hands. Kill him. Alpha Mark would actually kill him. And she would have to let him because you couldn't have feral, aggressive wolves roaming the populated area. However, Harley would have to be 6 feet under before she let anyone kill her brother. She took that knowledge, that rooted feeling, and embraced it. If it ever came to that, she'd take Matthias and run off. Find somewhere to live. A place to start over that they could call home. I need time, she said. I need to know how bad it is and if he really won't be able to change back. Alpha Mark seemed surprised at the determination in her tone. Yes, well, yes, well. I can give you a week. He's not allowed anywhere near other pack members. He can stay in the backyard, but I refuse to let him into my home. She would work with what she was given. Okay, a note of warning. Harley, you will be on your own. With Ben gone, I do not have the resources to have my wolves babysit you while you train your brother to behave. The way he talked made her grit her teeth. He spoke as if the whole situation was some child aspiring to do something they would never achieve. Like he was just humoring her. I got it, she said through her tight jaw. Feral wolves are animals of instinct, Alpha Mark said. They are not to be messed with and will do what they think is necessary for the preservation of their lives. Remember that. And with that, Alpha Mark gave Matthias a narrowed look of warning and headed back into the house. Will coughed. I think that went all right. Don't you? Then Ben woke up in the dark. It took a second for his eyes to adjust, and when they did, he glanced around at the metal box around him. At the end of the box, by the door, a set of bars had been screwed in. Where was he? What was this box? It reminded him of the trailer his dad and Kim used when they moved houses and had to bring all their furniture with. Kim hated every second of it. All the piling up and unpacking drove his brother mad. In the dark, the beginnings of a smile curved the corner of his lip at the memory of his brother. Then it dropped when he remembered what had happened. Harley, was she okay? Had she been taken to? And this box, did she sit in one? Or did that rogue get her out in time? He had to get out. Otherwise, If they did have Harley, she could be in trouble. With as much force as he had, Ben used the side of his fist to bang into the wall beside him. Any bang sounded out of steel. These walls were thin sheets of steel. Shit. Steel was a pretty durable, flexible metal, but it also was strong. It'd take a lot of force to break through, and even with the added strength of his wolf, that would not be enough. Crawling forward, Ben ignored his sore back and arms and curled a hand around the bars near the front. He jerked on them once. Nothing. However, there was what looked like a latch on the side where the bars met the wall with a lock attached. That must be how the bars opened. Something on the other side of the door clicked, and then the front of his box began to open. He threw up a hand to shield his eyes from the bright outside. "So you are alive. Good." A low, female voice said. Ben pulled back and sat against the wall, squinting. He really didn't want to be too close to those bars in case whoever was on the other side decided to try and reach in with a weapon. Though if they had a gun, he was trapped and unable to run. The thought made his wolf whine. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman behind the bars crossed her arms over her chest. She had blonde hair, long, tied into an extremely tight ponytail. Though her features were strong and her expression intimidating, wrinkles had begun to form along the edges of her mouth and eyes. In another life, one where he hadn't just been tranquilized and kidnapped, he'd have thought she was beautiful. "My name isn't important. What is that you answer my questions. Then maybe we won't have a problem." "I don't have a problem with anyone," Ben said, resisting the urge to hold his hands up. For some reason he felt like he was facing up against a caged tiger. "And I don't remember stepping on anyone's toes." Further down, somewhere outside the box cage, a wolf howled. Ben's senses went on alert. There were other werewolves in other box cages. "What is your relation to the Willow Creek Wolf Pack? Why do you need to know?" He fired back. Why would he tell her anything? "I'd be careful. Child, I'm not the one in the cage." "Yeah, well, it wasn't really my choice to be here." He wasn't usually this snarky, but he thought about what Cam would do in this situation. Or what Will, one of the toughest wolves he knew, would have done. "Fake it till you make," it came the answer. Surprisingly, the lady laughed. "You Willow Creek wolves never do things easy, do you?" "Look, miss, I don't know what you think I did or what you think I can do for you, but I can assure you, it's not about what you can do for me, but what I can do for you. If my men find out you haven't been helpful, well, let's say they're quick to draw," she said, then in a more curious tone. "I wonder what Ms. Pierce would say if she saw you now." Ben bared his teeth. "If you've done anything to Harley, he cut himself off, not really knowing what he'd be able to do while trapped in a cage. "I should let my men kill you now, one less abomination in the streets. The Willow Creek Pack did nothing to you." He growled, "So that was it then." The lady and her crew had a thing against werewolves. Just what they needed. Some humans deciding they got to play God. Another thought came to him then, sharp and fast, and he sucked in a breath. This lady didn't know his name. She kept calling him Child. Not Ben, but she knew Harley's name. His blood went cold. "You leave Harley out of this. She can't even shift. She's just a human and has nothing to do with any of this." Those words set her off. She stepped forward, close enough that he could see Legion in the tight jaw. "Harley doesn't deserve to be human. There are other people out there who needed a hell of a lot more than some stupid little kid." Now he was confused. Humanity wasn't something to be given, just like being a werewolf. It's something you're born with, not a gift. He must not have hidden his puzzlement well because the woman noticed. "Interesting, Ms. Pierce has a more unique past than you think. Little wolf, as she spoken it all about her father, about her childhood. To be honest, Ben didn't know much about Harley's childhood, other than the attack on her family. Still, that didn't mean he'd ignore his loyalty. It doesn't matter. Harley is protected by the pack. Good luck getting to her. Oh, I have my resources. Some of them are closer than you think, and I am not opposed to doing what I have to serve the greater goal, she declared with the SW Army smile. Forget the questions. Maybe I'll just keep you around as a participant. I'm sure you'll be useful to me somehow. Enjoy the fresh air. Wolf, it won't last long. The lady walked off. Tired beyond belief, Ben slumped back and rested his head against the steel wall. These people must not know much about wolves. Already this cage was making him restless and his wolf aggravated. Too much time in here and any wolf is bound to go stir crazy. A stir crazy, aggravated wolf was something no one ever wanted. Especially if they were to escape, they'd lash out at their trappers and anyone in the way. These people had other wolves here and had been keeping them for who knows how long. Ben curled his fingers into a fist. How many shifters would he find trapped here if he looked? More pressing matters rose to the surface. For some reason, this woman had it out for Harley, and it involved her latency. He had to get out and find a way to warn her, Will, and the pack. But how? Chapter 26 Will. Discovering his childhood friend was an actually dead hit like a slap to the face. When he felt the explosion years ago, he didn't want to believe it. At 11 or 12, your best friend wasn't supposed to die. The worst that happens is a fight. Death. No preteen should have to deal with death. But he did. He'd had to come to terms with it. The day after the attack was hell. His parents told him the news, yet a part of Will couldn't understand the gravity of what happened. Despite this, he still had to move on. And so, after the funeral in which they buried a tiny, empty casket, he'd slowly begun to rebuild. School had been hard, the kids around him whispered. If they were tough enough, they'd ask him straight up about Matthias, what it was like to lose him. For weeks afterward he'd been lost, wandering from class to class, hitting baseballs by himself, and crying in his bed at night when he was sure no one listened. There were moments when he'd think of Harley. He couldn't imagine what it felt like to be the little girl who'd lost her whole family. When Matthias was around, he thought she was annoying, nothing but a little sister who always wanted to hang out with the big boys. And she called him Willie, who wanted to be called Willie. It had taken years. That was the thing about death, it refused to go away, instead hanging a weight over his life. As he'd made new friends, as he trained, he never forgot about Matthias and how it would be to have him by his side. Now, Matthias actually was by his side. His brain couldn't comprehend it, but there he was, staring up at him and Harley. Matthias Bierce wasn't dead, and Will had moved on without him, but guilt formed a rock in his gut. As the best friend, he wasn't supposed to let go. Will was supposed to hold on to Matthias and make sure he wasn't actually dead. There'd been no body in that casket. His parents had told him that bombs erased all of a person, but his brain had been telling him not to believe it. But he did. He had let go of his best friend. Will, Will, don't do that. Harley kneeled on the grass in the backyard, her hand rubbing at Matthias' furry side. Her eyes were pink from crying, but he didn't care. She discovered her late brother was alive. If he wasn't so self-conscious about crying, he would have followed her lead. Do what? You're drifting off on me, she said. Don't do that. I'm not drifting off. Matthias gave an animal-like sneeze and got up to rub his face on Will's cheek. He made himself laugh and nudged Matthias away. You getting sentimental in your old age? Diaz. The wolf growled low at him. Right now, Matthias was present with them. So far it seemed to come in little spurts: human, wolf, human, wolf. They'd sat in the yard for almost 40 minutes, and so far he'd hopped twice since Alpha Mark left. However, even as the wolf, Matthias hadn't done anything. He seemed calm when Harley and Will were there. Matthias sat back on his haunches right in front of him and stared at him hard. Sorrow pierced his chest. "I'm sorry, Matthias." Matthias winced and shook his head. "Not your fault. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you make me see?" The wolf only looked at Harley and then back to him. He understood. If Matthias had come to Will, there was no guarantee he wouldn't have assumed him to be some random rogue and then tried to kill him. A rogue hunter had to be quick to draw most of the time. More often than not, it was kill or be killed. He'd gone to Harley first. Harley, who'd gotten curious and needed to know more about the wolf. Harley, who always wanted to give other people chances. The kind, generous, keeps to herself. Latent wolf. "Your sister saved your life," Will said, "and argued with the Alpha to get you to stay. She's tougher than she looks." "PFF, you're right," says Mr. Macho. Harley grinned. That grin pierced right through him. She was beautiful, and with the way the sun lit her dark hair, it was a picture he knew he wouldn't forget for a long time. Inside him, his beast curled in contentedness. When they'd faced Matthias, his wolf had been twitchy and anxious. However, his wolf settled quickly. It was that instant reaction that helped Will put the pieces together about Matthias. He couldn't remember anyone else who'd been able to calm the beast inside him, other than Harley. Of course, Harley would always calm his wolf, because his beast had decided to take Harley as his mate. Will didn't have the guts to tell her he didn't want to scare her off. A while ago, right around the time Harley dekissed him and he'd slept in her room overnight, his wolf had just woken up and decided he'd heard stories of people whose wolf accepted a mate before the human half. It was rare, but it happened. Will's wolf seemed to be one of them, and his human half wouldn't be too far behind. Actually, it was his human half that pulled the leash now. His wolf wanted to pull her close, mate with her, protect her, and never let her go. Will, on the other hand, didn't want to push her. She'd been dealing with a lot over the last couple of weeks. Integrating into the pack, making friends, Ben being kidnapped, and now discovering Matthias was alive was a lot to handle. He wouldn't add to her plate. He would never push her. If one day Harley decided to move on, Will would let her. His wolf would be crushed, but he'd do so much more to keep her happy. The girl deserved the world and more after all that she'd been through. He refused to hold her back, even if it did rot his insides slowly. A rumble started up the wolf's throat, and suddenly, his wolf slink to the pack pulled a bit. Will's head shot up. "Matthias, is that you?" The wolf growled low and the link pulled again. But then, something else. Attached. "No way." Will breathed. "What is it? What's going on?" His wolf howled low in happiness. "Matthias, he just linked up to me. Somehow." Light entered Harley's expression. "Does that mean the pack will be able to feel him?" Slowly, Will felt around that link and shook his head. "I don't think so. It feels like he's somehow made himself a separate line. I've never seen anyone do that before." "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "Could mean we will be connected. Could mean nothing but." He sent Matthias his emotions, balling them up and shoving them down that link. Matthias pulled back. "Looks like it works like the pack link. Can you feel anything from him?" Can he communicate that way? He tried to ignore the hopefulness in Harley's tone. As a latent wolf, she wouldn't know much about a link, except that it was there. He didn't want to tell her something that would turn out to be wrong. If he wanted to. I think we could figure it out, but he has to send the message first. He tested it out a bit, throwing sentences Matthias' way. No dice. I think it's only emotions, Will said, and it's not as strong as you think. I'm only getting little bits here and there. He grabbed the emotions Matthias sent out and tried to decipher them. It was like trying to hold water. However, he picked out the really strong ones. Happiness. Gratitude. Frustration. Okay. We can work with this though. Right. We will. He promised. Then, with sadness, told her, but not right now. I have to go search for Ben. He'd have to be blind to miss the dejected look that crossed her face. You're right. You're right. You're right. Of course. Go find Ben. She waved him off. He stood, not wanting to leave. But Ben. He had to find Ben. I'll come back. Harley, we'll work on it. I promise you. I know. Thank you, Will. He bent over and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. He wanted more. Wanted to gather her up and stay here, and he made himself walk away. Will. He glanced back. Be careful. Hardly 2 days passed. Will and the search party were still out, combing the towns, territories, for Ben. She waited, all but twirling her thumbs, for Will to come back, with Ben. The pack had a weird weight over their heads. Everyone seemed in a somber mood, not quite right since Ben disappeared. When the sun rose, they all got up and went about their day, and when the sun slid over the horizon and they went to bed or out for a run. Going through the motions of life, she didn't know an Omega could have so much effect on the pack. But he did, and for some reason that only made her feel worse about his disappearance. These people loved each and every wolf in the pack. They were family, through and through. Half of the pack had begun to mourn Ben, as if he wouldn't come back. She couldn't believe it. Refused to believe it, because then everything would be her fault. She'd forever be the girl who got Ben killed. This morning Harley got up, had some cereal for breakfast, and decided it would be a good day to get out of the house. So she packed a water bottle and her current romance novel into a bag and went for a walk. Matthias trailed after her. Any time she went outside now, Matthias was there. She'd been good about getting him water. The one time she went out to give him food, she'd seen him with a rabbit in his mouth, shooing away. After that, she figured he could go find and catch his own food and she wouldn't ask any questions. The humidity weighed on her skin and lungs. The sun shined high and bright today without any wind to combat the heat. She'd slathered on a layer of sunscreen with the hopes that it would be good enough. I'm thinking we can go back by the creek, she told Matthias. Anxiety pricked at her skin at the thought of heading into the woods. But today the sun was out. She had Matthias, and the creek wasn't too far. Besides, those people would never get close to the pack house. The rock where she'd once hung out with Bailey was a perfect place to read. If Matthias wanted, he could catch little fish. It seemed like a win for both of them. 3 chapters in, Matthias hopped up beside her and gathered close. On the 4th chapter, he'd fallen asleep. His heavy breathing made her laugh. Even wolves could snore. Time passed in the same way it always did when she read quickly. Barely a blink and her watch said 3. Matthias got up, laughed for a bit, and came back looking very satisfied. She tried not to think about what small creature he'd eaten for lunch. This is what it's been like for you, she said softly, hunting when hungry, drinking when thirsty. Seems like a decent life. She rubbed at his ear. His eyes had gone vacant now, only wolf. He'd done that all day. If she wasn't paying attention, she wouldn't have noticed, but she did. And every time her heart broke more, the whole time his wolf had stayed calm. It was as if even his wolf knew she was family, was one to protect. I'm sorry, Matthias. I know there's no way I could have known. No way for a child to have done anything significant, but I still feel guilty. I think that's something that might take time to go away. Matthias' ears perked up. He stood, paws at the ready. Matthias. Cam appeared through the trees. He looked surprised to find her there. I thought that was you. He nodded to Matthias, who only watched him. It's okay, Matthias. This is Cam. He's a friend. Will told me about him. Cam gestured with his chin to Matthias. I think it's cool. You've gotten your brother back. We will get yours back too. We will. Maybe if she said it often enough. How are your parents holding up? About as good as any parent missing a child. They're worried. I get out of the house when I can. It's too much sometimes, so I patrol. Her gut soured. Cam, if there's anything I can do. I appreciate it. Harley, right now. It seems we just wait. Has Will said anything? Cam shook his head. No, he will when he finds something. I just wish he'd let me go with. Help out. She picked out details. His leg hadn't stopped moving. He rocked side to side, and his dirty blonde hair stuck up in different directions. The worry ate at him too. It sucks to be left behind. Sometimes, though, Ernie, I think only your parents needed you here, just as we need you to help with patrols. Cam sat on the other side of the creek, on the ground. He didn't want to get too close to Matthias, which was a good call. She wasn't sure her brother Wolf would take too well to others. She set her book back in her bag. Unable to meet his eyes, she cleared her throat. Cam, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what happened. What happened? Happened. Don't blame yourself. Harley, if I wasn't such a complete idiot. You're not a complete idiot. She caught his half smile. Maybe only half. No, Harley. If anyone is to blame, it's Ben. He knew not to go to the meadow. He knew it was off limits. The meadow was off limits. Why didn't anyone tell me that? She tried not to sound too accusatory, but it came out that way. If she'd known. We didn't think you'd want to go back. Figured it was too much. And no one's been there in ages. Ben should have known that. Matthias pushed his flank into her side, trying to offer the comfort he could. I pushed him. I asked him to go. I wanted. I thought maybe I could get some type of closure or something. She pressed the heels of her palms into her eyes. But the whole thing was stupid. It's over now. Like you said, we're needed here. So you and me. We will wait. And when Ben comes back, we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Chapter 27. Darkness isolates some senses and expands others. Ben lived in the darkness for days, trapped in a small metal box barely as wide as his wingspan. If he spread his arms, the cool steel walls touched his fingertips. He knew days passed because the lady, Celine, stopped by the trailer next to him each morning to talk to the poor bastard trapped there. Ben listened as she greeted him good morning and told him of the camp's plans for the. Then she'd reassure him they were doing everything to find a way to cure him of his disease. As if werewolves weren't born werewolves. The lady was out of her mind. And either not thinking or didn't know much about his kind. His hearing was impeccable. The few were in the cage. She wouldn't be able to distinguish much beyond muffled voices. Ben was part animal his hearing meant to help him catch prey, or prevent him from becoming it. The darkness swallowed his vision, but he adapted well. He wouldn't be able to read in this cold blackness, but he saw where the bars met the wall and the rust on the major hinge keeping him in. The energy his body, his senses, would have given to help him see instead went to enhance his hearing. So he heard every conversation between the lady and the wolf clearly. Dominic, sweetie, you okay? This was not the first time she'd given the wolf an endearment. With the disgusted way she looked at Ben, he didn't think the lady thought highly of wolves. Yet this wolf, she treated like a well-to-do prisoner. He bet Dominic even got a bigger cage. The wolf didn't answer her, though he breathed heavily, raspy. He was trying to push back the change. He wanted to tell him not to fight it. If you irritated the animal enough or didn't let it out regularly, the animal inside eventually took over. People who fought their inner beast had as much of a chance of going feral as wolves who refused to revert to their human form. If the beast thought there wasn't going to be another chance to get out again, it would hold the beast form for as long as possible, forever even. "I'm working on this," Celine said. "We're getting closer to the girl." Ben tensed. Celine was obsessed with Harley and her latency. Each time she talked to the wolf, she assured him they were focused on getting her. As if Harley's latency could be scooped out of her and given to Dominic. "I've tried other methods," she said, then cleared her throat. "They've been less than successful. I've got a source. It's a last resort, and he'll hate me for contacting him. But I can't sit here and see you like this." Dominic huffed a humorless laugh. When he spoke, the words came in between gasps for air. "Give it up." There was a tinny bang, like a fist meeting thin metal. "Don't you dare talk like that. You hear me. I did not put this much effort in for you to toss it aside. I will contact my source," she said, "and will proceed with plans." The door to the trailer came down and slammed shut. Ben easily recognized the loud tick, tick, tick of the wheels along the metal track of the door. Then the lock on the outer door clapped shut. Ben sat against the wall, resting his head against the wall behind him. The distant sound of people Celine's troops moving about reached his trailer. If he focused, he could differentiate the tones: laughter, arguments, singing. How had Celine gotten so many people to follow her? How had she convinced all these people to work under her, for her useless cause? She'll check. Later, Dominic said through gasps. It took Ben a moment to realize he spoke to him. Occasionally, the two of them talked, though it wasn't more than a few words he wore there. Ben gave a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, she likes you a lot." Some days Celine checked on Dominic more than once. "No, you." "She sure as hell doesn't like me," Ben said in a quieter tone. The trailers gave a bit of an echo, which carried his voice easily to Dominic. "Check on you." "Yeah, she does that." A moan came from the other trailer. Then, in a small, pain-filled voice, Dominic said, "If you find a way past the bars, take her by surprise. When she opens the doors." Why was he helping him? I mean, they were both stuck in cages, but Celine liked this other guy. She spoke as if she'd let him out someday. If the guy helped Ben get out, that possibility of freedom might disappear. He'd say he didn't trust the guy, but he'd heard every conversation between him and Celine since he'd been trapped here. The guy hadn't shown any inkling of being a part of the lady's twisted plans. "The wolf," Ben said softly, "will not like you pushing him down. He'll want to show his dominance. If you want to control it, the change, you're going to have to let him through every once and again." A half-human, half-animal whine came from Dominic. He really didn't sound good. "If you don't change, you'll go feral. Then you'll be stuck in the wolf form with no way back." I let him out. Dominic groaned. "He won't listen to me. So he changed before." "How often is your change?" "V varies. Not good." An inconsistent or unanticipated change was never a good sign. It meant the wolf was beginning to fight for full control, or that the human half wouldn't be strong enough to control the wolf. And you need to show the wolf you're listening to him. If he's afraid you'll never let him out, he'll take over. It needs to be a mutual relationship. Dominic didn't respond after that. Though a bit later, the distinct sound of cracking bones came from the other trailer. Ben winced. Dominic needed to get out. That cage would only further scare or irritate the beast. For Dominic. And his own wolf, Harley. He also needed to warn the pack and Harley. His pack bond wasn't working. He still couldn't feel anything from his pack brothers and sisters. Whatever they injected in him messed with his bonds. As it was, the wolf inside him twitched and whined. He hated the cage. He had to get out. Had to find a way through the bars. Then, when Celine opened the outer door, he could take her by surprise. Maybe get out in time. But how? The darkness was heavy. It made him aware of his every breath, his heartbeat, his restless muscles. Stay sharp. Will's voice reminded him. Will would figure a way out of here. Same with his brother. Cam wouldn't let something like a few bolts keep him from freedom. His eyes landed on the rusted hinge. Harley's mind wouldn't shut off. Every moment that Will was gone she spent worrying if he was in danger, or if he found Ben. If it wasn't Will, she'd think about Ben and where he was and what horrors he suffered. She tried to watch TV, hoping some mindless show would take her away for a while. But the comedy show she ended on didn't hold her attention. She had no idea what the show was about. 2 minutes later, it didn't matter. Jamie came around the corner into the living room. Harley expected her to walk past the door and continue on. Instead, she stomped it over and got in Harley's face. The first thing she noticed were the tears in Jamie's eyes. What is your problem? The vitriolic tone took Harley by surprise. She dropped the remote onto the cushion next to her. I'm sorry. Is this what you like to do? Jamie asked, wiping at her cheek with the back of her hand. Do you like causing problems for people? Jamie, My dad has never been stressed out until the attack. Then you come along and there's another. Is that why you left your last pack? Because you were nothing but a burden to them too. If she had a wolf, the beast would probably have been spitting fire, ready to tear off Jamie's head for the accusations. However, Harley didn't have a wolf, and she'd be lying if she said she didn't think some of the words had a kernel of truth to them. Defend yourself. Harley sat up straighter. Jamie, I have had nothing to do with any of this. If there was a way to get these people, whoever they are, to stop and leave us all alone, I would. Jamie's lips thinned. Will is out there right now, probably fighting for his life. Or Ben's. And if he gets hurt, it'll be your fault, because you couldn't protect Ben when it mattered. She gestured to Harley and the TV. And now this is what you're doing. What do you expect me to? At least act like this whole thing doesn't make you happy. Jamie spit. Then she stormed out. The TV was still on, playing canned laughter. Harley flipped it off and gripped the remote tight in her hands. If she could do something, anything, she would. But she was a fucking latent wolf. She couldn't even defend herself well. She was useless, she knew that. But to have Jamie come in and point it out. Harley clutched her butterfly necklace tight and tried to take a deep breath. The air in the pack house began suffocating her. It didn't feel clean enough, didn't soothe her lungs. Her vision dimmed. She recognized the signs of her body for what they were. Panic attack. She stumbled out to the front porch, trying to suck in air, to fight off the lightheadedness. Head between the knees, she told herself. She dropped the first step and pulled her head between her knees. All the while holding her butterfly necklace as if it were a lifeline. Thank you so much for joining me in this obsession with werewolves. I hope you've had a great time and can't wait to come back for more. Remember to subscribe, leave your comments, and share this passion with others. Until next time, keep being obsessed.